Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect on the surface, but you just couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about them? Someone charming, charismatic, maybe even beloved by everyone around you, yet you felt unsettled in their presence? Well, if you're an INFJ or you know one, there's actually a scientific reason for that uncanny ability to sense what others completely miss. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating aspects of the INFJ personality: their almost supernatural ability to recognize and expose the patterns of manipulation, dishonesty, and toxic behavior that other personality types often overlook. We're talking about 12 specific ways that INFJs, who make up only about 1 to 2% of the population, use their unique psychological wiring to see through facades and call out what's really going on. By the end of this script, you'll understand not just how INFJs do it, but why their insights matter so much in a world full of confusion and deception. So stick around as we explore the 12 ways INFJs expose evil people. 1. They read the subtext better than anyone else. Let's start with the foundation of everything INFJs do well: their ability to read what's happening beneath the surface of conversations. While most people listen to the words being spoken, INFJs are listening to what's not being said. They're paying attention to tone shifts, pauses, the way someone's energy changes mid-sentence, and those micro-expressions that flash across a person's face in just a fraction of a second. This isn't magic. It's actually cognitive science in action. INFJs have what researchers call introverted intuition as their dominant function. What that means in plain English is that their minds are constantly processing patterns, connecting dots, and drawing conclusions from subtle cues. They're noticing when someone's story doesn't quite add up, when there's a contradiction between what someone claims to believe and how they actually behave. Think about it this way: a manipulative person might say they care deeply about you while their actions consistently show neglect. A regular person might miss that contradiction. They'd hear the words and accept them at face value. But an INFJ, they're already cataloging the discrepancy. They're thinking, "You say you value honesty, but you just lied to your friend right in front of me." They're holding all of these contradictions in their mind simultaneously, and eventually, they reach a conclusion that becomes impossible to ignore. This skill is particularly powerful because manipulators and toxic people rely heavily on what we might call surface-level charm. They bet that people won't look too closely at the details. They count on others being busy, distracted, or emotionally invested enough in them that they won't scrutinize their behavior too carefully. But INFJs, they can't turn this off. Their brains are literally wired to notice these things, and once they've noticed, they can't unnotice. 2. They trust their gut feeling, and their gut is almost always right. INFJs are famous for having incredibly strong intuition, and honestly, when you look at the research, there's a good reason for that. Their intuitive sense isn't just a feeling. It's actually their brain processing thousands of data points subconsciously and then presenting the conclusion to them as a gut feeling. When an INFJ meets someone and immediately feels that something is wrong with that person, they're not being paranoid or judgmental. What's actually happening is that their unconscious mind has already detected multiple warning signs: inconsistencies in behavior, false emotional displays, manipulation tactics, and is sending them an alert. It's like their inner alarm system has gone off, and they can feel it in their body. The incredible thing is that INFJs are often right. Studies on intuition show that people with strong intuitive abilities actually have higher accuracy rates when making judgments about others' character. This is because they're picking up on genuine signals that are really there. A manipulative person might fool people with words, but they can't fool the nonverbal cues that INFJs are so attuned to. Here's what makes this particularly powerful in exposing evil people. INFJs don't need perfect evidence to trust their instinct. They feel it and they act on it. While other people are still trying to give someone the benefit of the doubt, the INFJ is already 3 steps ahead, mentally noting patterns and waiting for proof of what they already sense to be true. And usually, that proof eventually shows up, which validates what the INFJ felt all along. The tragedy is that INFJs often second-guess themselves because they're surrounded by people who don't trust their own intuition the way INFJs trust theirs. Friends and family members might say, "But they seem so nice," or "You're being too hard on them." This makes INFJs doubt themselves temporarily. But when that manipulative person inevitably reveals their true colors, The INFJ thinks back and realizes, I knew it the whole time. 3. They notice when someone's values don't match their actions. One of the core characteristics of an INFJ is that they have deeply held values. They care intensely about authenticity, integrity, and doing what's right. Because of this, they're extremely sensitive to when other people claim to have values but don't actually live by them. Let's say someone constantly talks about how much they love their family, but they're always canceling plans with them for trivial reasons. Or someone preaches about the importance of honesty while they're known for gossiping and spreading rumors. An INFJ clocks this immediately. They're thinking, you keep saying one thing, but you keep doing another. So which one is actually true about you? This matters so much when it comes to spotting toxic and evil people because manipulation often depends on this exact disconnect. A manipulative person might claim to be your biggest supporter while they're actually working against your interests behind your back. They might say they love you while they're systematically isolating you from your other relationships. The gap between their words and their actions is where the deception lives. INFJs are like human lie detectors when it comes to this particular inconsistency. They notice it almost immediately, and they can't let it go. It bothers them endlessly until they figure out which version of the person is the real one, the one they're presenting to the world, or the one they actually are. And usually, the actions are the truth. Words are cheap, but consistent behavior reveals character. This is also why evil people have a much harder time manipulating INFJs. When someone tries to use flattery, charm, or empty promises to win an INFJ's trust, the INFJ is simultaneously watching their actions. Do their actions match their sweet words? If not, the INFJ knows something's off. They might not confront it right away, but they're logging it in their mental database, waiting for more evidence. 4. They're sensitive to emotional manipulation and guilt tripping. INFJs are deeply empathetic people. They genuinely care about other people's feelings, and they'll go to great lengths to avoid hurting someone or making them feel bad. This makes them vulnerable to certain types of manipulation, specifically emotional manipulation and guilt tripping. However, and this is crucial, while INFJs might be vulnerable to these tactics in the moment, they're incredibly skilled at recognizing them once they become aware of the pattern. And once an INFJ recognizes that someone is deliberately trying to manipulate their emotions, something shifts. The empathy doesn't go away, but it gets channeled differently. Here's what happens. An INFJ realizes that someone is using their own kindness and empathy against them. A toxic person might say something like, if you really cared about me, you'd do this for me, knowing that the INFJ's desire to be seen as caring will override their better judgment. But once the INFJ realizes this is a pattern, that someone is consistently using guilt and emotional appeals to get what they want, the INFJ becomes laser-focused on calling it out. What's interesting is that INFJs often become really angry when they realize they've been emotionally manipulated. Not an angry that goes away quickly either. It's more of a slow-burning, righteous anger that comes from feeling betrayed. And when an INFJ gets to this point, they typically stop protecting the manipulator. They start asking direct questions. They start pointing out the pattern. They start exposing what's really happening, not just to themselves, but to anyone who'll listen. This is one of the ways INFJs expose evil people, by refusing to be silent about emotional manipulation once they've identified it. They'll say things like, you keep making me feel guilty for having boundaries, or you're trying to manipulate me by appealing to my guilt. And honestly, having an INFJ call you out on your manipulation tactics is not a pleasant experience for the manipulator. 5. They catch lies and inconsistencies in stories. INFJs have incredible memories, particularly for details that seem meaningful or suspicious to them. When someone tells them a story, the INFJ's brain is recording not just the main points, but all the little details, dates, names, reactions, context. And they're holding onto those details. Then, when that same person tells a slightly different version of the story a few weeks later, the INFJ notices. Maybe they said their car broke down on Tuesday this week, but 3 weeks ago they said it happened on Monday. Maybe they claimed they weren't at a particular place, but they mentioned being there when telling a different story. These inconsistencies might seem minor, but to an INFJ, they're everything. Because here's the thing about liars. They struggle to keep their stories straight. This is why investigators and therapists are often taught to look for inconsistencies in accounts. The more someone has to lie, the more likely they are to slip up and contradict themselves. An INFJ, with their incredible attention to detail and memory for meaningful information, will catch these slips almost every time. What's more, INFJs will often test someone's honesty by asking them the same question at different times or bringing up a story and seeing if they tell it the same way. They're not doing this to be difficult. They're genuinely trying to figure out if this person is trustworthy. And if the story changes, the INFJ's conclusion is made. This person is being dishonest. Toxic and evil people often rely on people not paying close enough attention to catch their lies. They think, who's going to remember what I said 3 weeks ago? The answer is the INFJ. An INFJ will absolutely remember, and they'll call it out. This is why manipulative people often find INFJs exhausting and threatening. They can't get away with their usual tricks because the INFJ is too observant. 6. They're experts at reading body language and nonverbal cues. While verbal communication is important, researchers estimate that between 60 and 93% of all communication is nonverbal. This includes body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and eye contact. INFJs, with their intuitive nature and emotional sensitivity, are exceptionally tuned into these nonverbal signals. An INFJ might notice that someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. They might catch the way someone's shoulders tense when a particular topic comes up. They might hear the slight change in someone's voice when they're not being truthful. These tiny signals are like a language that INFJs have learned to fluently speak. When someone is genuinely evil or deeply manipulative, they often can't control all of their nonverbal cues. They might be great at controlling their words, but their body might betray them. They might be pretending to be relaxed while their jaw is clenched. They might be claiming to be happy while their eyes look empty. An INFJ will see all of this and understand what it means. This is particularly powerful when an INFJ is trying to understand someone's true feelings or intentions. Instead of taking people at their word, they're reading the full picture. And when the nonverbal cues contradict the words, the INFJ trusts the body language. Because body language is much harder to fake than words. Evil people know that most people will believe the words and ignore the body language. They've built their whole game around this assumption. But an INFJ is paying attention to both, and when they don't match, the alarms are going off. 7. They hold people accountable for their behavior. INFJs have strong values, and they expect the people around them to have strong values too. When someone violates those values, when they hurt someone, behave unethically, or show a lack of integrity, INFJs don't just let it slide. They address it. This is actually one of the things that makes INFJs so threatening to manipulative people. Most people will tolerate bad behavior in someone they like or who has power over them. They'll make excuses. They'll rationalize. They'll pretend it didn't happen or wasn't that bad. But an INFJ will calmly and directly point out that what someone did was wrong. And here's the thing that really gets to toxic people. INFJs will do this privately first. They're not trying to humiliate anyone. They'll approach the person and say, "I noticed you did this thing, and I don't think that's okay because of this reason." They're giving the person a chance to explain, to correct course, to do better. But if that person doesn't take the opportunity, if they get defensive, make excuses, or do the same behavior again, then the INFJ shifts. They start talking about it more openly, not as gossip, but as a matter of integrity. They might tell mutual friends, "I'm concerned about this person's behavior," or they might directly distance themselves from the person while making it clear why. Toxic and evil people often count on other people's silence and tolerance. They're betting that even if someone notices their bad behavior, they won't do anything about it. An INFJ breaks that assumption. An INFJ will hold them accountable, loudly and clearly if necessary. 8. They notice when someone is playing a character. INFJs are incredibly perceptive about authenticity. They can usually tell when someone is being genuine and when they're playing a role or putting on an act. This is because INFJs themselves are often very authentic people. They tend to be who they are regardless of the setting, and they're sensitive to when others aren't doing the same. A manipulative person often presents different versions of themselves to different people. They might be charming and attentive with someone they want something from, but cold and dismissive to someone they've already used. They might be loud and confident in group settings, but withdrawn and moody when they're alone. They're constantly adjusting their character based on who they're with. An INFJ will notice this. They might not be able to articulate it right away, but they'll think, this person seems different when they're with other people, or they treat different people completely differently based on what they can get from them. And once the INFJ has noticed this pattern, they start wondering, which version of this person is real? Or is none of it real? This is particularly telling because authentic people are generally consistent. They might show different facets of their personality in different contexts, but their core values and the way they treat people don't drastically change. When someone's entire demeanor and behavior shifts based on who they're with, that's a red flag. And INFJs catch it. 9. They refuse to participate in or excuse bad behavior. One of the most powerful ways INFJs expose evil people is simply by refusing to go along with it. When someone tries to get an INFJ to participate in manipulation, gossip, or other harmful behavior, the INFJ typically refuses. And more than that, they often explicitly call out why they won't participate. An INFJ might say something like, I'm not going to help you manipulate that person, or I can't stay silent about what you did because it's wrong, or I'm not going to gossip about them, but I am going to talk to them directly about my concerns. This refusal to participate is in itself a form of exposure. Toxic people often operate in darkness. They count on everyone around them to be complicit or silent. When an INFJ breaks that pattern and refuses to go along, it highlights the behavior for everyone else. It makes other people more aware of what's actually happening, creates accountability. Moreover, evil people don't know what to do with people who won't be manipulated or coerced into silence. They're used to getting their way, to people going along with their narrative. An INFJ who stands firm in their values and refuses to participate in harmful behavior is like a mirror that the toxic person can't break. 10. They trust themselves enough to walk away. Here's something that makes INFJs particularly powerful when it comes to exposing evil. They're willing to walk away. They might struggle with the decision, they might feel guilty about it, they might second-guess themselves, but ultimately, if someone has proven themselves to be manipulative or toxic, the INFJ will exit the relationship or situation. And this act of leaving is, in itself, a form of exposure. When an INFJ walks away from someone publicly and is willing to explain why, it opens people's eyes. It makes others question the person they were willing to forgive. It demonstrates that the INFJ's concerns were serious enough that they were willing to lose the relationship over them. Evil people bank on the fact that most people will stay. Most people will tolerate bad behavior because leaving is hard, or because they've invested so much time, or because they're afraid. An INFJ might struggle with these feelings too, but they ultimately prioritize their integrity and their well-being over the comfort of maintaining a false relationship. 11. They communicate their concerns clearly and directly. INFJs aren't confrontational by nature, but they will confront when they need to. When an INFJ has determined that someone is being manipulative or toxic, they will usually attempt to communicate their concerns directly to that person, and then, if necessary, to others. The way an INFJ communicates these concerns is also important. They're not emotional or reactive. They're factual and clear. They'll say something like, I've noticed that you consistently do this behavior, and here's how it affects people, rather than, you're such a terrible person. This directness and clarity leave no room for misinterpretation or denial. Evil people often depend on ambiguity. They want the situation to be confusing so that their behavior seems defensible or so that people don't even realize what happened. When an INFJ cuts through that confusion with a clear explanation of what they've observed and why they have a problem with it, the evil person loses their main weapon: plausible deniability. 12. They follow their convictions despite social pressure. Finally, one of the most important ways INFJs expose evil people is by being willing to stand alone if necessary. Even if everyone else is accepting of someone's toxic behavior, if an INFJ has determined that the behavior is wrong, they'll continue to say so. This takes courage because it can be lonely. An INFJ might be the only person willing to acknowledge that someone is manipulative or toxic. Everyone else might love the person or think the INFJ is being too harsh. But the INFJ will hold their ground because their integrity matters more to them than social acceptance. Over time, other people often come around. They start noticing the same things the INFJ noticed. They start experiencing the same harm. And then they look back and realize, the INFJ was right all along. But even if that doesn't happen, even if the INFJ remains the only one calling out the behavior, they've still exposed it by refusing to be silent. Conclusion: INFJs are extraordinarily perceptive people with a unique ability to see through manipulation and expose toxic behavior. Their combination of strong intuition, emotional intelligence, attention to detail, and commitment to integrity makes them nearly impossible to fool for long. The 12 ways we've explored: reading subtext, trusting their gut, noticing value mismatches, recognizing emotional manipulation, catching lies, reading body language, holding people accountable, noticing inauthenticity, refusing participation, walking away, communicating clearly, and standing alone, form a comprehensive system that makes INFJs incredibly effective at exposing evil people. If you're an INFJ, you probably know that this ability comes with a cost. Can be exhausting to see what others miss. Can be lonely to hold people accountable when no one else seems to care. You might second-guess yourself or feel like you're being too judgmental. But the truth is, your perceptiveness is a gift. Your refusal to tolerate manipulation protects not just you, but everyone around you. And if you're not an INFJ but you know one, pay attention to their concerns about people. More often than not, they're seeing something real that you might be missing. INFJs aren't perfect and they can't catch everything, but their insights are worth taking seriously. They're not trying to rain on your parade or judge your friends. They're trying to protect everyone from being hurt by someone who doesn't have good intentions. The world needs INFJs precisely because they refuse to look the other way when something isn't right. They refuse to make excuses for bad behavior. They refuse to be complicit. And in a world full of manipulation and deception, that refusal is powerful, important, and worth listening to.